Hello everyone, today I'm here to talk about some of my favorite underrated romance reads. So, romance, women's fiction, chick lit, whatever you want to call it, is one of my favorite genres to read. I still would classify myself new to the genre. I read mostly new releases and things like that. There's so much of the genre that is untapped for me still. Recommendations you may approve of or disapprove of. You may think that they are not underrated, but they're just my personal opinion. So what underrated means to me are books I don't hear a ton about on BookTube. Sure, a lot of these I've heard a lot on other booktubers like hauls and like that, but I haven't heard them get like widespread. Like, when a book just takes over BookTube, it gets overhyped and things like that. These I would classify as underhyped. I would like to see more people read them and talk about them. And yeah, that's why I consider them underrated. So you could agree or not agree. Either way, these are just romance books I think you should read that I don't hear a ton of people talk about. So just wanted to get that quick disclaimer out of the way. Let's get on to the list. Next up is You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hoggle. I've talked about this a lot recently on my channel. I read this randomly on a whim a couple months ago and fell in love with it. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I was obsessed with it. In this book, we have a character named Naomi who is engaged to Nicholas, and she just really hates him. They were once in love once upon a time, and now the relationship has just gone sour, and she wants out of the engagement. She doesn't want to get married, but the only problem is Nicholas's family is footing the bill for their wedding, and they are crazy rich, and she is not, so she can't afford it. So she's like, maybe I can get him to like get out of this relationship too. And then basically this whole book is about them just realizing, hey, we've got a pretty messed up relationship. We were in love once. Maybe we should try to be friends again and go from there. So it's like a second chance romance. Also hate to love because in the very beginning you see so much animosity, and I just really enjoyed it. This is underrated to me. That's just my opinion. I haven't heard a ton of people read it and talk about it. I just loved it a ton, and I want more people to read it, especially if you're a fan of like really going into books where it's a dissection of a relationship and really exploring it in all avenues. I would highly recommend this one. I wish a lot of people would read this one. Next up is another one I have been talking about nonstop on my channel, and that is Reborn Yesterday by Tessa Bailey. This is her latest release, and it's self-published, and I bought it because it's about vampires, and I've read some Tessa Bailey books before. I would say that her books are very well known here on BookTube. The Fix It Up series, everyone has read that. After that book came out, a lot of people really went into her backlist reads and read a whole bunch of them, but I've heard no one really talk about her latest release, Reborn Yesterday. I would classify this as a romance, and I know you're like, all these other ones are chick-litty, this one's paranormal. Yes, but it is mostly romance. Romance is right to the core of this book, and this book is about Jonas and Jenny who meet. He's a vampire, she is not. You can guess what happens from there. I loved it. It's steamy, it's romantic. I want everyone to read it, especially if you're a vampire lover. You must read this book. Like I said, I've heard like, I don't know if anybody else. So yeah, I want like everyone to read this book because I'm just obsessed with it. And I'm so sad it wasn't like picked up by a publisher because I think this is great. And I know it will be a series as well. So I will buy all of them because I loved it so much. Next up is The Worst Best Man by Mia Soso. I read this one on a whim as well, and I really enjoyed it. This one is about a character named Carolina, and the book begins with her getting married, like on her wedding day, and then the best man of, the groom, the guy she's marrying, comes in, and he's like, yeah, the groom is not coming. Turns out we got a little bit drunk last night, and I told him maybe he shouldn't get married to you, and now he's gone. And so obviously Lena's very heartbroken and upset at, the best man, who is, yes, the best man, but also the groom's brother. It was going to be her future brother-in-law, and so it just is horrible. And then this book picks up years later. Carolina is a wedding planner. How horrible is that, getting left to the altar while you're a wedding planner? And she gets a job. She gets a chance to get this job at a hotel where she'll be like the exclusive wedding planner, and she has to team up with the marketing people that the job is picked out for her to make this big pitch for her to get the job. And who is she paired with? But none other than her ex-fiance's brother, the guy who kind of tore their wedding apart. So this is just animosity. They like to it's just hate to love. I love it. It's one of my favorite hate to love books, but I haven't heard a ton of people talk about it here on BookTube, and I think it's a solid rom-com for sure. I could see this easily being a movie. It could be a great like rom-com movie, especially if you're a fan of weddings. I know a lot of people love the wedding trope and the wedding movies. I do. I'm a sucker for them, but I really love this one and haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. One of my underrated reads in general is Close Enough to Touch by Colleen Oakley. I read this a couple years ago and I loved it. I'm sure you can guess why I was attracted to this book. The cover is freaking adorable. Even on the inside, it has bicycles on it. I was there for it. So this book, I haven't heard really a lot of people talk about, but it's like one of those like gem in the rough type of books that you just kind of gets under the radar a lot of these, honestly. And this is about a girl named Jubilee who has this disease where like she can't touch anybody. She's allergic to the human touch, and she always has to wear gloves and things like that. And she's a recluse. She never leaves her home. And then sadly her mother passes away, and she has to like realize, oh, I need to like be self-sufficient and like, you know, get a job. And she's like, how do I do that if I can't go out into the outside world? Because she's so scared, because she's allergic. She's legitimately allergic to the human touch. She gets a job at the library, then she meets a guy, romance strikes up. But I wouldn't say this is a really big romance read. It's kind of on the back burner, but it's just an adorable, quiet type of romance book that I loved and adored. If you want a book that really goes into character and it's just a quiet, slow type of book, you have to be in the mood for those. I would highly recommend this one. And I've heard, like, this book came out, I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago. I still haven't heard anybody really talk about it. Next up is the Happy Ever playlist by Abby. This one is the sequel to The Friend Zone, which I read last year and enjoyed. I actually heard about that through BookTube. And I haven't heard a ton of people talk about the sequel to this. And I honestly much preferred this one to the first book, which doesn't happen to me a ton, especially with chick lit books. But this one I loved, and I've heard, I think, just from Peace Love Books read it and enjoyed it, which I'm happy about, but I haven't heard really anybody else read it yet. So please read it. I really enjoyed it. But this one follows Sloane, whose fiance has passed away, and she's still really struggling with it even a couple years later. And then one day she's driving and a dog literally jumps in her sunroof, and she tries to contact the owner several times. She never gets a reply back. So she's like, this dog, you know, is gonna be mine, because he's really helped her like come out of her shell and try to really recover from the death of her fiance. And then 2 weeks pass by and the dog's owner contacts her and is like, hey, I want my dog back. And she's like, well, where have you been? And he's a musician on tour in Australia and he's coming home. They start like a text relationship, kind of flirting back and forth, and they finally meet and things go from there. It's got music, it's got dogs, it's romantic. Oh, this was so close to being a 5 out of 5 for me. The first half, easily 5 out of 5. The second half kind of meandered and I didn't love it as much, but goodness me, I adored it. Definitely one of my favorite romance books. I'd say if you didn't love The Friend Zone, like myself, I would highly recommend checking out this one. And I've just heard nobody talk about the sequel, and the sequel is phenomenal. Read it, please. Another sequel that I loved much more than the first one is Girl Gone Viral by Alicia Rai. I read Girl Gone Viral last year. I liked it. I didn't love it. It was a solid rom-com read for me, but I really fell in love with Girl Gone Viral. In this book, we follow the character Katrina, who has had a lot happen to her in her life and her past, and that's why she stays so private, like so private in the so private. She even has a bodyguard because she's just really legitimately scared because a lot of things has happened to her in her past. And basically something comes up in her life where she's like blown out on Twitter because she was flirting with this guy, and then it got blown out way of proportion, and she's really worried that her past will come up to catch her. And her bodyguard Jazz takes her away to his family's like peach farm. That's right, a peach farm. And they've been yearning for each other. It's a sweet friends to lovers romance that I just really loved. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, and I just want everyone to read it, as I will continually keep saying, obviously. Next up is Island Affair by Priscilla Oliviers. I don't own this one. I read it on NetGalley and I really enjoyed it. It's a great summer read that I think is gonna fly in under the radar. When you think of summer reads, you think a lot of Christina Lauren, Tessa Bailey and things like that, but I think this is a solid one that I would highly recommend that I haven't heard literally anybody talk about it. I didn't even know about it till I found the cover on NetGalley, and obviously I was very attracted to the cover. So in this book, we follow a character named Sarah who is visiting the Florida Keys. Her family is vacationing there, and her mom is just her mom's in remission from cancer, and she was supposed to go with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend bailed at her at the last minute. Overhears this whole conversation, but this guy named Lewis, who is a paramedic, like firefighter type of guy, and they strike up a conversation. She's like, hey, Can you like be my fake like boyfriend for a week? Actually my fake fiance, because I may have lied to my mom, said we were engaged, but we're not. And thus begins like the fake relationship. It is overly cheesy. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's very, very insta-lovey, very cheesy, but goodness me, do I enjoy some cheese with romance. That sounded so weird. You get what I'm saying? I enjoy overly cheesy romances a lot of the time, and this one I enjoyed, especially with the whole setting of the Florida Keys, really sold it for me, and I really think this will be a great summer read, a quick one at that. But again, I don't think anybody has really talked about it or heard about it, hence why I think it's underrated and you should check it out. And there you have it. That was just a few of some underrated romances that I think you should check out. Now, there's not a ton. I think as the more time goes on, obviously I'm going to read more books. That is evidently clear, but I'm going to read more books that kind of go under the radar, that don't get a lot of love that I think they should. Now, like I said, you could agree or disagree with me. I would love to hear what you think about any of these books, whether you want to check them out or not, whether you think they are underrated or not. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.